A letter from Vietnam arrived at The Tonight Show on a Tuesday afternoon. It was handwritten, smudged at the edges, folded 3 times. By Thursday night, it would stop the most-watched show in America mid-broadcast. Johnny Carson would hold that letter in his hands, and for the first time in 23 years of hosting, he would do something no one expected. He would break every rule of late-night television. And the country would never forget it. But how did we get here? It was November 1971. The Tonight Show was at the peak of its cultural power. 15 million Americans tuned in every night to watch Johnny Carson deliver his monologue, interview celebrities, and make the nation laugh before bed. The show was a ritual, a safe space, a place where nothing too heavy ever landed. Carson was the master of timing, the king of the reaction shot, the man who could make Bob Hope laugh and put Richard Nixon at ease. But on this particular Thursday, something was different. The show began like any other. The NBC Peacock logo faded. The curtain parted. Doc Severinsen and the band launched into the theme. Ed McMahon's voice boomed across the studio. From Hollywood, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The audience erupted. Carson walked out in his tailored suit, waved, took his place behind the desk. The monologue rolled. Political jokes. A bit about the weather. Laughter on cue. But then, mid-joke, Carson stopped. He looked down at his desk. His hand moved to a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there during rehearsal. The audience kept laughing, unaware. Doc leaned forward slightly, confused. Ed's smile froze. Carson picked up the letter. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the first few lines. And everything changed. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. He didn't finish the joke. He didn't smile. He looked up at Doc Severinsen and made a subtle gesture with his hand. Cut the music. Doc's trumpet lowered. The brass section went silent. The studio, which moments ago had been roaring with laughter, was now completely still. 15 million people watching at home leaned closer to their screens. Carson cleared his throat. "I need to read you something," he said quietly. His voice had no trace of humor. No setup. No punchline coming. Just wait. Ed McMahon, sitting to his right, shifted in his seat. He didn't know what was happening. The producers in the booth were frozen, hands hovering over buttons, unsure whether to cut to commercial. But Carson didn't wait for permission. He began to read. "This letter was sent to us earlier this week," Carson said. "It's from a soldier stationed in Vietnam. His name is Private James Holloway. He's 21 years old. And he wrote this 2 days before he was supposed to come home." The audience didn't make a sound. Carson's eyes stayed on the letter. He says, "Mr. Carson, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I had to write it. I watch your show every night we can get a signal. Sometimes the picture cuts out, but we all gather around the one TV we have in the barracks, and we watch you. You make us forget, even for just an hour, where we are. You make us feel like we're home." Carson paused. His jaw tightened. He took a slow breath and continued. "I'm going home in 2 days. I can't believe it. I've been counting down for months. But tonight I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the guys who didn't make it. The ones who won't get to sit on their couch and watch your show with their families. I feel guilty, Mr. Carson. I feel guilty that I get to leave and they don't." The letter trembled slightly in Carson's hands. "So I wanted to ask you something. If you ever read this on your show, could you just say their names? That's all. Just so people know they were here. Just so someone remembers." Carson looked up. His eyes were red. He wasn't crying, but he was close. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the stage lights. And then, without a word, Carson reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a second piece of paper. It was a list. Handwritten. 12 names. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Carson unfolded the list slowly. He set the letter aside and held the names in front of him. He looked directly into the camera. Not at the audience in the studio. Not at Ed. Not at Document. At the millions of people watching at home. Private Holloway sent me the names of his 12 friends who didn't make it home, Carson said. His voice was steady but raw. He asked me to read them. So I'm going to. He paused. Took a breath. And then he began. Corporal Daniel Reeves. Age 22. From Ohio. Silence. Private First Class Marcus Green. Age 19. From Georgia. More silence. The camera stayed tight on Carson's face. No cutaways. No reaction shots. Just him. And the names. Sergeant William Torres. Age 24. From Texas. One by one, Carson read every name. Slowly. Deliberately. He didn't rush. He gave each name space to breathe, to exist, to be heard. The audience didn't move. Some were crying. Others sat with their hands over their mouths. Doc Severinsen's head was bowed. Ed McMahon wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When Carson finished the last name, he set the paper down on his desk. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat there, staring at the list. Then he looked back at the camera. Private Holloway, Carson said softly. If you're watching this, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for writing. And thank you for making sure these men are not forgotten. He folded the list carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, over his heart. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Carson stood up from his desk. Ed's eyes went wide. The producers in the booth started talking frantically into their headsets. But Carson ignored all of it. He walked past his desk, past the guest chairs, and stepped off the stage. He walked directly into the studio audience. The cameras scrambled to follow him. He stopped in front of a woman in the third row. She was middle-aged, crying quietly. Carson knelt down in front of her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Margaret," she whispered. "Do you have someone over there, Margaret?" She nodded. "My son. He's in Da Nang." Carson reached out and took her hand. "He's going to come home," he said. Not as a joke. Not as a bit. As a promise he had no right to make but made anyway. "He's going to come home, and you're going to hold him, and he's going to know how much you love him." Margaret broke down. Carson stayed there, kneeling, holding her hand, while the cameras captured it all. The audience wasn't applauding. They were silent witnesses to something too raw for applause. After a moment, Carson stood. He walked back to the stage. He sat down at his desk. He looked at Ed. Ed was barely holding it together. Carson gave him a small nod. Then he looked at the camera one more time. "We'll be right back," he said quietly. The show went to commercial. But no one in that studio moved. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. When the show came back from break, Carson didn't do his usual banter. He didn't bring out a celebrity guest. Instead, he did something unprecedented. He picked up the phone on his desk, the red rotary phone that was usually just a prop, and he dialed a number. Live. On air. The audience watched in stunned silence as the phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice answered. Tinny and distant, filtered through a military phone line halfway around the world. "Hello? Is this Private James Holloway?" Carson asked. There was a pause. Static crackled. Then, "Yes, sir. This is Holloway." The studio erupted. Not in applause, but in gasps. In disbelief. In awe. Carson smiled for the first time that night. "Private, this is Johnny Carson. I'm calling you live from The Tonight Show. We just read your letter. And I wanted you to know, your friends' names have been said. Millions of people heard them tonight. They won't be forgotten." On the other end of the line, Holloway's voice broke. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Carson's own voice wavered. "No, son. Thank you. Are you going home?" "Yes, sir. Tomorrow morning. Then you get home safe. You hear me? I will, sir. Good. God bless you, Private. God bless you, Mr. Carson. The line went dead. Carson set the phone down. He stared at it for a moment, then looked at the camera. His eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. The show ended 10 minutes early. No guests. No comedy bits. Just a letter. A list. A phone call. And a moment of silence that echoed across the entire country. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The next morning, NBC received over 10,000 letters. Families of fallen soldiers. Veterans. Active duty servicemen. All thanking Carson for what he did. The network executives were furious that he went off script. But Carson didn't care. He kept the letter and the list of names in his desk drawer for the rest of his career. Years later, after Carson retired, a journalist asked him about that night. Why did you do it? The journalist asked. You could have just read the letter and moved on. Why did you call him? Why did you go into the audience? Carson was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because those 12 men didn't get to come home. The least I could do was make sure one of them did, in spirit. And that Private Holloway knew he wasn't alone. But there was more to the story that Carson never told publicly. Something that happened after the cameras stopped rolling. When the show ended that night, Carson didn't go to his dressing room. He didn't speak to the producers who were waiting to discuss what had just happened. Instead, he walked back to his desk, sat down in the empty studio, and stayed there for nearly an hour. The cleaning crew found him still sitting there, the letter in his hands, staring at the list of names. One of the stagehands, a Vietnam veteran himself, approached him carefully. Mr. Carson, he said, that was the most important thing you've ever done on this show. Carson looked up, his eyes still red. I should have done it sooner, he said. How many letters like this do you think we've thrown away? The stagehand didn't have an answer. From that night forward, Carson made a quiet policy change that almost no one knew about. Every letter that came to The Tonight Show from active-duty military personnel was brought directly to him. Not to his assistant. Not to the producers. To him. He read every single one. And when he could, he responded. Sometimes with a phone call. Sometimes with a surprise visit to a military hospital. Sometimes just with a handwritten note. He never publicized any of it. Never used it for ratings. Never made it part of his public image. It was private. Personal. A promise he made to himself after reading Private Holloway's letter. In 1973, 2 years after that night, Carson received another letter. It was from Margaret, the woman he had knelt beside in the audience. Her son had come home from Vietnam. He was alive. He was safe. And he wanted to thank Johnny Carson for giving his mother hope when she needed it most. Carson framed that letter and kept it next to the one from Private Holloway. Those 2 letters stayed with him for the rest of his life. When he passed away in 2005, his family found them both in his personal safe, carefully preserved, still as important to him 30 years later as they had been the night he first read them. The Tonight Show continued for another 2 decades under Carson's leadership. He interviewed presidents, movie stars, musicians, comedians. He made the nation laugh through Watergate, through economic recessions, through cultural shifts and political upheaval. But whenever someone asked him about his most memorable moment, he never mentioned the celebrities. He never talked about the ratings records, or the Emmy Awards. He talked about a letter from Vietnam. About 12 names. About a phone call to a soldier halfway around the world. About a moment when late-night television stopped being entertainment and became something more important. Something sacred. The letter is still preserved today. Not in a museum. Not in an archive. It's in the hands of Private James Holloway, now in his 70s, living quietly in Pennsylvania. He keeps it in a glass frame above his fireplace. And every year on Veterans Day, he takes it down, unfolds it carefully, and reads it to his grandchildren. He tells them about the night Johnny Carson stopped the biggest show on television to remember his friends. He tells them about the phone call, about the woman in the audience, about the way the entire country paused, just for a moment, to listen. And he tells them that Carson never forgot. That every Veterans Day afterward, until Carson's death, Holloway would receive a handwritten card in the mail. No return address. Just a signature. JC. And inside, always the same message. They are not forgotten. Holloway still has all 27 of those cards. He keeps them in the same drawer where he keeps his military medals. Because to him, they mean just as much. The legacy of that night extends beyond just one soldier, one show, one moment. It changed how television approached difficult subjects. It proved that entertainment could make space for something real, something painful, something important. Other talk show hosts cite that night as the reason they knew their platform could be used for more than just laughs. David Letterman once said in an interview, "Johnny showed us that you could stop the show. You could put down the jokes and just be human. That's the most important lesson I ever learned from him." And he tells them that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply say a name. Because a name is a life. A name is a story. A name is proof that someone was here. And Johnny Carson understood that better than anyone. He understood that television wasn't just about entertainment. It was about connection. About seeing people. About making sure that in a world that moves too fast and forgets too easily, some things, some people, are remembered. That night in 1971, Johnny Carson didn't just read a letter. He changed what it meant to be a host. To have a platform. To have 15 million people listening. He showed that the greatest thing you can do with power isn't to make people laugh. It's to make them remember. To make them feel. To make them care. And 30 years after that broadcast, when young talk show hosts ask what it takes to truly connect with an audience, the answer is always the same. Watch the night Johnny Carson read the names. Watch what he did when the script didn't matter anymore. Watch how he chose people over protocol. How he chose humanity over entertainment. That's the blueprint. That's the standard. That's what it means to be more than just a host. That's what it means to matter.